And action.
My name is Leah Baer, and I'm 72 years old, and I'm enjoying age. In so many ways, my life is just beginning. David Bowie once said, as you grow older, you become the person you were meant to be. And he said, I think that's happening to me, and I feel like it's happening to me as well now. For most of my life, I've done work that I really loved doing, teaching, mediation, counseling, social work, and working with families to help them to speak, to feel free, to be safe, and to find their voice. And I did volunteer work like that too, activism, civil rights, and early feminist and gay rights movement work. But I retired from all of that 2 years ago and started writing. It was the thing I really always wanted to do. And I'm currently studying corporeal writing with Lydia Yuknovich. And I've learned so much about transforming my story, about abuse, about living in the body and writing from the body. And I feel so freed by all of that. I'm really grateful to be living here in Portland in a community so full of writers and artists who are incredibly supportive, and that's really helped my writing too. I'm married to somebody who's equally supportive and who, as cliched as it sounds, is my best friend. I have a son and a daughter and grandchildren, and we are a close and literary writing family. A lot of terrible things happened in my childhood, but good came out of it too. And part of the good was learning from my mother how to write, to love writing, to love books, and from my abusive father, how to ride horses. And as I grew up in a very difficult and frightening life, I learned to live in my body on horseback, oddly enough. And it made me a stronger person, emotionally, psychologically. I own a horse that I still ride, and I'm a very fortunate woman that I have health, that I can do all of those things. I mark my abuse, the serial rape, as having begun when I was 12. But as so often is true with abuse, it began long before. The stage was set long before. My father, like many men of the 40s and 50s, had a great deal of fiscal control in our family. What we now call gaslighting is something that he did with both my mother and me. And those were days when you didn't talk about this sort of thing. I think the days of men like that, of people like that, are ending. I'm so glad that a movie like this, like What I Couldn't Say Then, is being done. Grateful to see that movies like The Hunting Grounds, movies like Spotlight, are winning awards. And to know that men and women and boys and girls are speaking out, and that maybe the days of silence are ending. And here is my letter to my father. You can never rape me again, never cut me again, never again silence me. Those weren't the words that flashed through my mind when a stranger called to tell me you were dead. No. The words I heard in my mind were these: my children are safe from him. Their grandfather can never hurt them. It was strange to think that. My children were adults by then. It was 2002. I was 57 years old. My children were in their 20s and their 30s. Even if you had found us in Oregon, even if you had figured out that I changed my name from Olson to my mother's maiden name of Baer, you could not have hurt them. Logic would have told me that they were far beyond your reach. But I love my children beyond reason or logic. And here is a thing that you never knew about what parents do. They love their children. They feel their pain. They always, no matter how old their children become, want to protect them, save them. They would die for their children. Maybe nobody ever loved you like that. Maybe you never learned that. Maybe your life and my mother's and mine would have been different if someone had spoken up for you. Maybe you were beaten and raped as well. But I will never forgive you. Some things can never be forgiven. I will not live my life hating you. I will not do that to myself. I will try to imagine that you were once a frightened little boy, and that act of imagining will make me a better human being. I will try to remember that people like you are not born that way. I will try to believe that you once had a story to tell and no one listened and nobody cared. When the stranger told me you were dead, I realized that all those years, and the last time I saw you, I was 21 years old. I'd carried my fear of you and my fear for my children like a burning, searing coal in my heart. And I cried. I cried silently. The caller never knew. Not tears of grief, but of joy. Tears of relief, tears of release. I released my fear of you, my fear for my children. I released the belief that what you did to me would make me a misfit who never would succeed in life. And I knew I was finally free. I thanked the caller. He probably thought I was grieving, and I hung up. And I went back to work that day at the work I did then, social work and mediation for children and their families, the work of protecting children, testifying in court for them, encouraging them to live free from fear, and to have the courage to speak. I was 12 the first time you raped me. I was 13 when you took a razor to me and left a wound I still have, a place near my heart, a place where I nursed my children, a place that no longer has feeling. I don't remember how old I was when you started beating my mother, and she started drifting to her own world. I don't remember when you told both of us we were crazy, and you could send us to that institution over the hill, Camarillo State Hospital for the mentally ill in California. I only remember those were the days of silence. I only remember that people like my mother and me had no language then. Even if someone had listened to us, a mother and her daughter on an isolated ranch, a horse ranch miles from the nearest neighbors, what would we have said? In those days, we didn't have these words and phrases: domestic violence, battered wives, marital rape, serial rape, pedophilia. Without a language, how do you tell your story? Without words to describe experience, how can you free yourself? Did that happen to you when you were a little boy? I tried to free myself. I wrote in my diary. You found it under my bed, and you wondered why I would write such things. You tore up the pages in front of me. You were hurt that I was so cruel. You were wounded, you said. You reminded me that you taught Sunday school at the same church that Roy Rogers and Dale Evans attended, that you were a respected horse trainer, that our ranch was called Horse Heaven Ranch for a reason. That with your gentle ways you turned around broken and abused and neglected horses, that you fed and clothed me and kept a roof over my head. What kind of a daughter would be so ungrateful? You reminded me I could be institutionalized. Girls like me should be, you said. And then, you told me I had a body that rivaled Lolita's, and that whatever had happened was my fault. My body's fault. For years, I believed the story you made of me. For years, these things controlled my life: silence, shame, fear, pain, guilt, isolation. But I found books, and they gave me stories of survival, and I wrote. I hid my writing from you in tack trunks and in old grain bags in the stables, and I found solace and freedom in other writers in school, and I began to find my way out. And then there was the night I found my voice, and I stopped you. You taught me to build fences and bale hay and drive tractors, and you taught me to ride 7 horses a day, and I did that until my 16-year-old girl's body was as strong and muscular as any boy's body, 5 foot 10 inches tall, 10 inches taller than my mother, an inch taller than you. I didn't know how strong I was until the night I saw you dancing with my mother in the kitchen. And then I realized in the darkness you weren't dancing, you were strangling her. And I said in a voice I didn't know I had, the deep, dark voice I have now, "Stop it." And you pulled away from her neck and she fell to the floor, and you kept your arms outstretched as if I had pulled a gun on you. And that was the beginning of your end. Your reign of fear. It wasn't easy. There were other assaults by you, even the one where I pulled a gun on you and dropped it because I never, ever, ever wanted to be like you. Once, before the last time I saw you, I asked you, "Do you love me?" You paused, lit a cigarette, blew smoke rings, slow smoke rings, and said, "I love what I see of myself in you." And that was the beginning of my freedom. Because aside from my red hair and my fair skin and my love of horses, there is nothing of you in me, nothing. You once told me that one day life would break me. It breaks everybody, you said. That, like so much else you said, was a lie. I'm not broken. I am not the story you tried to make of me. You took my childhood away, and I will never get that back. But I am strong. Stronger every time I tell my story. Stronger every time I help others to tell their stories. Stronger with every passing year. And the child within me is alive. She is fierce and strong and will never be silenced again. Never, never, never.